Welcome to her Life Unscripted podcast, inspiring burnt out women and stretched thin mamas to embrace the unscriptedness of life. Brought to you by Anna Osborne. Hello and welcome to Her Life Unscripted, episode 15. It is a beautiful day out today. We've had some cooler temperatures here in Northern California, even though it is the summertime, and it is nice because we are starting to heat up again, which always means time to be outside, time to be swimming in the pool, all those things that I love to do with my kiddos. So it is just really exciting to see that weather increase a little bit and start to really head into what feels like summer. I'm very, very pleased to be able to introduce you guys to our guest today on the podcast, Dr. Lourdes Viado. She is a marriage and family therapist and also a psychologist working in Las Vegas, Nevada. She's just so passionate about helping women create intentional and authentic lives, and she has this great area of expertise in working with survivors of childhood sexual abuse, childhood emotional neglect, and relationships. And what I love, there are so many parts of her interview that are just breathtaking. She has this way of putting words together that almost sounds like poetry. There's just so much warmth to it. And I know that you guys are going to be able to feel that during the course of the interview. And she just does this amazing way of being able to talk about how we make our lives sacred. And I'm so pleased to be able to have you guys listen to the interview, and I cannot wait to hear what you think about it and all your amazing feedback. So without further ado, Dr. Lourdes Viado, enjoy. I am so excited to have Lourdes Viado on the podcast today for Her Life Unscripted. We are, Lourdes and I have met through kind of being on this podcasting journey together. And she is just amazing in terms of offering support and encouragement. And we had a little tech issue as we were, getting rolling today. And we were both so excited that we solved it on our own without Google, which for those of you out there that are, a little bit weary of tech, that it's just really amazing when you solve something on your own without the help of Google. So we were like cheering for ourselves that we figured out how to get our mics and headphones and all those things to work. So Lourdes, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Welcome. And I'm so excited to introduce you to my audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, it is going to be a fun conversation. Now, before we started recording, Lourdes, I gave your very amazing introduction to the listeners, so they know a little bit about you. But one thing that I think is so, amazing in the work that you do is you really work a lot with women and have this expertise in trauma. And so there's a lot of the work that you do in helping individuals heal from childhood sexual abuse, emotional neglect, and traumatic relationships. And being on the front line doing that work is something that I just, it's where I got my roots. That's where I started out my work when I first started doing therapy all these years ago. And I just have so much respect when I meet another person who is on the front line doing that work, because it is, it's powerful work. And yet it is just, it's so rewarding and just really an honor to see people move through a process from trauma to really thriving in their own lives.
Yeah, it really is. It's an incredible process to watch someone go through and to be a witness to.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that, Lourdes, that you do in your work is you really do work with women in order to be able to kind of rediscover these lost aspects of themselves. And so, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but I would love for you to just share a little bit with the audience about when you're working with women and they're coming to you and saying, I don't even know who I am anymore. What are can you just give a little bit of a background around kind of what that process looks like, or how women find you when they aren't really even knowing how to find themselves?
I think most clients show up in therapy and there's usually some presenting issue or concern that they want to address. And when you start to go deeper with whatever that is, if it's a relationship, if they're struggling with parenting, which is also a relationship, then it's really looking at what is the difficulty beneath the struggle. So if they are feeling stuck in how they're handling a relationship, and they are feeling that everything is their fault, and they're taking on all this responsibility, then a starting point would be this feeling of being stuck, this feeling of being overly responsible. Where does that track back to? What are the origins of that? Because usually when there's a strong, powerful emotional charge to something, there's a thread running back from that to something in their childhood or in their adolescence or even young adulthood. So it's about finding those threads and tracing them back to where the roots are. And usually it's going to go back to fear. And the fear is usually related to two things. And it's the fear of abandonment, which is also the fear of withdrawal of someone's approval or love. And then there's also the fear of being overwhelmed. And I use the term overwhelmment. It's not original, but overwhelmment being fear of being overwhelmed by emotions. And the emotions could be sadness, anger, anxiety. And so what happens is the fear of either being abandoned, rejected, love being withdrawn, or the fear of being overwhelmed by emotions are what ends up driving their decisions and their actions. And so it's really going back to where in time did this begin? And I pull in what they call parts work or internal family systems, and we look for these parts that are stuck in time. And then we start there. So that's kind of the long version.
No, I love that answer. I just love the fact of, that when we reach out for support, it usually is about something that is happening, usually, in the present moment. It's whatever's causing us distress in this moment. But the way that you described looking at the difficulty below the struggle, so whatever that presenting challenge is what's the difficulty below that, and recognizing that that can really be traced back to these other experiences of our lives. And just this idea that we can have this fear of overwhelm, of being overwhelmed by our feelings. And I think that's a very common thing in a lot of ways. We are modeled good feelings.
Yeah.
Like these are the feelings that it's okay to have, right? And especially as women, right? We can have we can be kind and loving and all these sorts of things, and these feelings that make us good, right? That kind of, which is crazy talk, but that's how we get modeled, right? Versus these are the feelings that are bad, anger or sadness, loneliness, rejection, that you can't feel those things, right?
Yes. And so you make decisions based on, well, I don't want to be really sad. I don't want to be angry, because then if you're sad or angry, then you have to do something about those feelings. And so it's better to just avoid them completely, which is understandable. So a lot of times that's what will happen. I use the metaphor a lot with my clients and it's not original. Again, I got this from a mentor that, all the parts of us are passengers on a bus, and you can't kill anyone and you can't kick anyone off. And so you have to find a way to include everybody on the bus and honor them and give them attention, because what happens is you'll have a part of you take over and start driving. And so, the rageful part of you, let them drive maybe when someone's harming your children, but otherwise they don't need to drive. And so the process becomes, who's driving right now? Who has taken over? Is this the fearful child who felt that she caused her parents' divorce and she's driving? And she's stuck in time because it's 2016 and you're a 39-year-old woman. And so learning to find out that this is a part of me who kind of steps into the driver's seat. Also, this helps clients with not feeling that they are the challenge or the concern. I'm not the fear. I'm not the anxiety. It's a part of me that gets really strong. And so it's, how do I get that part of me to step out of the driver's seat? How do I escort this part of me back to another seat and let them know they don't need to drive, I can handle it? So it's really that type of getting to know the parts of you and what happens when those different parts of you are driving. It impacts your journey, where you go, if you break down, if you get lost, if you crash into a ditch. And so really learning that, okay, that's just a part of me, and I need to find out why she takes over, what she needs from me, how can I support her so that she realizes she doesn't need to drive.
Yes. Oh, I got chills when you were talking about that, because it is so often that we will, ascribe or connect with a feeling and make it our identity, like that, or this story that we tell ourselves. I mean, just the example you gave about, a young girl thinking that she caused her parents divorced, and then seeing that be part of her story despite being a 39-year-old woman, and just the impact it takes on us especially over time, that erosion that happens when we start letting our experiences become truth, like become ruler, and then we integrate them as us, right? Like, I caused it, I'm the problem, it's me, versus that was a really hard experience and it impacted me, but it wasn't my fault. Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. So thinking about, your work with women and coming and really wanting to
Mhm.
reconnect with these parts that they've lost of themselves, is there particular themes or patterns that you see in your work of women coming and saying, I really feel like I've lost this part of me, or it's this part of my identity that it's gone non-existent? Does that ever happen, or is it just so broad and so different?
I think that for many of them, they don't even realize that they have stepped out of who they are, their authenticity. That's part of the process, is helping them to reconnect with what they have lost. And a lot of them don't know that they've lost something. They may have a sense that things are off and that they're not happy or satisfied, but they can't really connect that back to or trace that to losing a part of themselves. And um, there's a really good quote by Carl Jung. I can't remember the whole thing, but at the end of it, he says that a lot of our problems, our challenges in life all come because in some way we've gotten away from our instinctual grounding, which basically is that we've gotten away from who we are and how we are rooted. And so, whether and that getting away from our instinctual grounding can happen in so many ways. It can happen through trauma, sexual abuse or some other type of trauma. It can happen from emotional neglect, but somehow something happened where we disconnected from our roots. And so it's about getting back to that. So I think that in terms of knowing that they've gotten disconnected, that's part of the process, is even finding that out. And then once they've discovered that, is finding out what are those parts of me that I've lost. And that can be very challenging because there's a grieving process that they go through when they realize, oh, I lost the feminine aspect of enjoying being a mother that was taken from me because of something that happened. So when I had my own children, I was not able to connect, to love, to nurture them due to something that happened to me before, where my ability to connect with my children was just taken from me. They didn't have that skill. And so then learning how to grieve that loss and move forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a really great way of putting it, is that it's almost like you don't know that it's missing because it's always been missing, or when you became consciously aware of it, it was already gone. And I think that is actually a really empowering thing that, you're speaking of, is that we cannot even know that there's aspects of ourselves that are lost because they've been lost for so long, right? And the people that we look to around us are modeling, they're not modeling to us what's been lost, right? They're modeling to us the status quo. And so it's interesting, and I think very important, that you talk about when clients are coming to you, especially women, that it's not that they're saying, hey, help me rediscover the lost aspects of myself. That's discovered along the journey. It's really about coming in and saying, something doesn't feel right. I don't feel like myself, or I feel like I'm in a fog, or everybody else around me is smiling and enjoying life, and I'm just kind of there.
Right. And I think one of the things, now I just thought of this as you were speaking, that I guess one pattern that I see with women is when you ask them, how would you describe yourself to another person? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What do you love? And they can't answer any of these questions because they don't know. And that's one thing that I do see, is that they don't know who they are. They don't know anything about themselves. They don't know what brings them joy. They don't know what they struggle with. It's just that they don't have that clarity.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting conversation too, in terms of, as women, do we give ourselves permission to connect with our joy? And you guys can't see
Yeah.
Lourdes, but we can see each other. Her eyes just like lit up as she was, as we kind of were talking about that permission. But is that, is there a part that, as we, kind of go through puberty and kind of into adulthood, that as women, that we disconnect with that joy, and that, kind of being in our own physicality and our own body, can it still give us pleasure? Do we give ourselves permission to feel pleasure within our bodies? And can we feel pleasure by experiencing joy with others? And do we give ourselves permission to that? Or is it something that we earn when we've done enough hard tasks, or we've completed the to-do list, and so now I can have the fun. And I just think that that's a really profound conversation is, as women, do we give ourselves permission to feel and experience joy? Or is it something that we feel like we have to earn or deserve?
Yeah. Or we can have that when we're enough. And that's another big one is not enoughness is a huge, I would say a common factor I see in my clients is a sense of I'm not smart enough, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm not a good enough mom, I'm not a good enough wife. And then with that comes the critical part, and then this ability, they have compassion for everyone else around them, and they will do and love for everyone around them. But to do that for themselves is they haven't even thought about, and it's so alien and difficult to do for some of them to begin to do that.
I just, I pulled this quote up on social media when you were talking because it just like popped out. But actually somebody that we know posted this the other day. And I just was like, I love how you can love things on Facebook now. But the quote was from Anne Lamott. I think I'm saying her name right. But she said, "Oh my God, what if you wake up someday and you're 65 or 75 and you never got your memoir or novel written? Or you didn't go swimming in warm pools and oceans all those years because your thighs were jiggly, and you had a nice big comfortable tummy, and you were just so strung out on perfectionism and people pleasing that you forgot to have a big, juicy, creative life of imagination and ridiculous and radical silliness and staring off into space like when you were a kid. It's going to break your heart. Don't let this happen."
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that, it's so beautiful of what you're talking about, is that being able to experience joy because in this moment we're enough.
Yes.
And period.
Period. Yeah.
Like, that's it. But one thing that you brought up too is this idea of self-compassion. And can you share a little bit about that? Because I think it's just, it's a profound thing of, we can be so compassionate to others, but the moment that we start giving ourselves a little compassion, we start criticizing it and just cutting it off at the knees. And so how do you kind of define self-compassion maybe in the work that you do with women?
I think I would describe it to them, I use the word self-compassion, but then it would look like being very loving and gentle with themselves, with the way that they talk to themselves. Seeing that everything that they're doing, whether they judge it as weak or bad or not enough, that whatever is happening, there's a purpose for it, there's a reason. So, for example, the part of you that maybe is more withdrawn and kind of pulls away from people, and you feel that this part of you should be more able to engage, and so you struggle when you're in social situations. So you get upset, like, why can't I just go in there and talk? Why can't I just be like other women and be able to feel comfortable? Instead of getting angry at yourself about this, first recognize this is a part of you and identify the part. So maybe after we, one of the questions is, where can you remember when you first felt this way? When did this show up? And maybe it'll be when I was in middle school and I wasn't fitting in, when I was 5 and I came home and found out that my mom had moved away and not told me. And so then we find, then it's this part of you, what is she feeling? And then we go into what she's feeling. She's feeling like, I'm not good enough, and that's why my mother left. There's something wrong with me, which is why I can't make friends. And so we identify all the feelings around this part. And then the next part is, what do you think this part of you needs at this time? What do they need to hear? What did they need, but they didn't get? And so then it's exploring how this part could have been supported. And held not literally, but just a space created for the emotional pain that they were feeling. And then after we find that out, then it's about, okay, I'd like you to go back in time to this part and tell this part of you what she needs to hear. So it sounds a little bit like you have multiple personalities going on, but it's not. It's really about them learning, because when they start talking to that part of themselves with love, and saying, I understand that this is hard for you. I understand that you feel like people don't want to connect with you, or you're not good enough to be a part of this experience, or whatever it is. And then they change the way of talking to that part of themselves. Instead of, what's wrong with you? You should be able to do this. Instead, it turns, they're now saying to themselves, it's okay that you feel this way. it makes sense that you feel this way. Who wouldn't feel this way? And I know you're really sad and you're really hurting and this is really scary. But you know what? I'm going to show you how to interact. I'm going to support you while we learn how to figure that, we'll figure this out together. And telling themselves it's okay that we don't know what we're going to do. It's okay that we're stuck, but we're going to support each other and be compassionate while we're in this process. And it really, that's just the beginning. And it gets to a point where when they're struggling now in the real world or the external world in a situation, they can actually identify, oh, okay, that's the 6-year-old part of me. And usually I have them come up with a name for this part of themselves, and it can be a real name or it's a descriptor, or they'll even bring a picture of themselves in at that age so they can kind of envision who they're talking to. But in the real world, when they're now faced with a situation, they're able to identify who's reacting right now. That's the part of me that, when I was 5, and this is what she needs. And then they talk to themselves in a more loving, compassionate way because they're remembering that this was a little girl who was terrified, who was left alone. And she doesn't need right now to be told, what's wrong with you? Get it together. You should be able to handle this. And then that's what lessens the emotional charge of this part of them. So that when they're in situations where she might be triggered, she's not as reactive. And then over time, part of the process is letting this part of you know she doesn't need to step in and do this for you anymore, protect you anymore, letting her know that you can handle it. And the you I'm talking about here is, in internal family systems, they call it the self. In Jungian psychology, they call it also the self. But I've had clients call this part of themselves my grounded self, my wise self. I have another client who called this part of her, the heart of me, which I thought was really beautiful. So, when I'm in this situation, my wise self does this and lets my fearful self know that she can handle this, and she may not do it very well. She might stumble. She might be scared, but I don't need to step in and drive because she's going to drive.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I just think about this, being able to offer that compassion like you're talking about, but also kind of this linking of hands of saying, like, I'm honoring why that 5-year-old was so scared, and being scared actually kept you safe. Like, that was an amazing coping skill. That fear was needed. It was so hard and it was so scary, and that fear was needed, but you don't have to be afraid anymore. Like that you can come along with me into what life is like now and really create a connection or a container for it, to allow those pieces of our past to come with us. But like you said, not driving. They're part of our story. They're not the only story.
And I love that you mentioned that they had a purpose, protecting them in that moment. And that's a big part of this, is that all these parts of ourselves that we may judge or consider bad, they are all purposeful, and usually it's to protect us. So the 5-year-old child steps in and takes over because she doesn't want you to get abandoned. She doesn't want you to feel rejected. So she's going to step in and make sure that doesn't happen. So the wiser part of you, your grounded self, lets her know that you don't have to protect me anymore. It's okay. And thank you for trying so hard and trying to keep me safe. So letting that there's that dialogue also of honoring what that part did for them, and letting that part know that she can just sit down and at the back of the bus and look out the window now.
Yeah, enjoy the ride versus being on high alert to keep everybody safe. That there's now an adult in the driver's seat, and an adult you can trust because the adult is you. That you're not having to put trust in other grown-ups who should have kept you safe then. And that you get to trust the adult who really is in charge now, and that really is you.
I love that you said that too, because I've actually had clients say in this process that, wow, I feel like I'm growing up. I feel like an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This ability to have, trust ourselves. I think that, one of the things that I feel is especially true in trauma is that, when there is big, scary things happening to us, especially when we're young, is that we can have this sense in our body that it's not right. And whether it's around, witnessing abuse or experiencing abuse or whatever the trauma is, and we can go to the adults around us and go, hey, this doesn't seem right. And oftentimes the adults around will go, oh, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah. That's just dad being mad, or that's just, uncle being you know, loving. And they justify or rationalize for whatever reason. There's no blame there.
Right.
There's just that for whatever reason they give these answers. And so what happens to the child in that sense is they stop trusting themselves. Like, my body is sending off all these alarm systems, but the grownups in my world are telling me that it's all okay. And so I think that throughout this process that you're talking about is being able to then learn that you can trust yourself again, that you don't need to look external for somebody to tell you whether or not the situation is okay, that you can really trust that physical feeling, whether whoever, it's your gut, it's your universe, your God, like whatever you call it, that physical feeling that you get is something to really honor, and that can keep you safe, and no longer placing that to somebody else who could really discount or invalidate that.
I think, that's a big piece of it, is just trusting themselves and trusting that they know what they know, and what they know is enough. They also don't need someone else to say, yeah, this is good. This is right. And which goes into the people pleasing, and the external, looking to the external world to say that they're okay. So there's really a lot to that whole piece of trusting that what they feel and what they know is what they feel and what they know, and that they don't need anyone else to confirm or deny that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an empowered place that you can move to when you really honor that your truth is the truth.
And I think, one other piece of this, when you talk about truth, I was thinking of authenticity, which you're hearing a lot of right now about what authenticity is. And one of the things that I heard this again from another mentor, but that that you are close to clarity on yourself and just your life, and also that you're moving towards authenticity when you are feeling scared, when you are feeling fear, or when you are feeling stressed, because this is his quote: "Authenticity is dangerous." And I thought, that is so cool. I love that. And what he meant by that is, authenticity is dangerous because it means now that you're showing up, you have to now deal with what people will think and what they're going to say, and what might happen now that you are showing up. You might have people move out of your life. You might have people share not so pleasant feelings about this. And so authenticity is very scary. And that is part of the process also that I work with clients, is moving through that fear and stepping into, yes, it's scary to show up as you are, but what's the cost of not showing up? What's the sacrifice that you're making? And there's the word sacrifice comes from the Latin word to make sacred. And so, I tell my clients that you need to make your life sacred, and often making your life sacred, there's going to be a sacrifice. There's going to be a sacrifice, and maybe you might lose people. You might have to start over. But there's also a sacrifice if you don't. You lose yourself. So either way, make your life sacred.
So much going on as you're sharing about that. It just feels so, it feels so big. And I think that is something that, one of kind of our taglines within Her Life Unscripted is, being seen even when we're scared. And I think that so much when we are fearful, we do want to make ourselves small, right? And that the more that we kind of step into who we are destined to be, the bigger we can get and the more visible we are. And with that becomes this opening, this very, very, very tragic and unfortunate opening for criticism. Right?
Yes.
And so being able to not let that criticism from others move us away from the courage that we have in just being seen, and knowing that we can be big enough to be seen, and that's okay. We don't have to make ourselves smaller in order to make everybody else comfortable, right? That we can make ourselves big enough to be seen. And if that creates discomfort in others, that's about their journey and not about us to shrink down to make their journey easier for them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love this idea of making your life sacred. And I do want to be mindful of your time, because I know you're being so generous of giving it today, but I feel like you and I could talk for hours because I'm just so inspired by everything that you're sharing. And I know my audience is going to love it too. But this last point that you made of you have to make your life sacred, like that just, it brought tears to my eyes as you were saying it. And so are there any sort of rituals or creative processes or anything that, as you have clients that are just working their tushes off to make their life sacred and how scary that is? Are there any kind of tactile experiences or anything that you encourage them to be able to do to make that less metaphorical and more in the moment?
Well, there are two things that I do with my clients, and one of them is, and this is, I say one thing, but this takes it's a process, is really finding out what matters most to them. What are their values? And a lot of times, like I said at the beginning, women don't know when they come in. They don't know what's important to them. So it's a process of finding out what is important to you. Is it family? Is it freedom? Is it learning? Is it spirituality? And there's all, there are more than one value that we all have more than one. So it's really finding out what are the values that are most important to me. And then looking at those values and asking, are those really my values, or was that my mom's value? And is that my value because it's my mom's value? And sometimes that's okay if it's also your value, but they've never asked why, what are the points of reference that I use for making my key decisions? And typically it's our values. And so you need to know what your values are, or you'll be making key decisions based on other people's values. And so really finding out that, okay, this was something important to my parents. It's not important to me, but oh my gosh, this is so showing up in my life because I'm still at that place where I still want mom and dad's approval. I don't want them to be upset with me. And so the one big part of this is finding out what matters most to them and getting clear on their values, and then prioritize them, and then exploring what will my life look like? What would it mean to start living my life aligned to what really matters to me? And I feel that the closer you are to living your life according to your values, and it can't be 100%. Obviously, if you have children, you might not be able to travel the world excessively, but the closer you can live aligned to your values, then the more at peace you will feel, the more satisfying your life will be. I think if you're 70%, 80% living your life according to what, you really care about, you're at a good place. And so that's the first thing, is the values. The second part of that is, how do I live this out in the world? Because that's also a huge thing, because now how to implement that, how to deal with people's reactions, what that means for me to live according to my values. And so learning too that it's not as simple as knowing what's important to you. It's actually harder to put that into action. So I would say that's a big piece of the work. And then another thing that I do with clients is we work with dreams. And dreams, they're organic. They come from within you. And, some clients will refer to dreams as their intuition or God or the universe. Whatever they feel that they can connect that to. But in my work with dreams and with clients, the dreams that they are having reflect exactly what's going on within them. And there's a quote, I can't remember it exactly, but it goes along the lines of, dreams don't tell you what you want to hear. They don't tell you what you think you know. A dream portrays the life of the dreamer exactly as it is. And so when clients bring dreams in, it accelerates the therapy because we get right to the point. There are times where I have been in session with a client who maybe has been coming in for a few months, and if they had not brought this dream in, we would never have gotten to what the dream revealed, maybe in 6 months. And even, my clients are just shocked, oh my gosh, I can't believe that showed up in my dream. And I'm not interpreting the dream for them. They're bringing their dream in. We're looking at the images. We're talking about the feelings evoked by the images, what the images mean. And it's not using a dream dictionary. It's, what does that image mean to you? When you see this image in your dream, how do you feel? What are your connections with that? And you know that you are doing the dream work. That's not a good word, right? You're doing the dream work in the way that's meaningful and authentic to you when you have an aha. It's like a light bulb. It's just like, whoa. And that's how you know that, okay, this is what this dream is meaning. But if you're not getting to that, it's not working. But yeah, so dreams are just an amazing part of the process.
Amazing. That is just so powerful. I can't thank you enough for sharing today. This is just really, really just inspiring work that you do. And I'm just so grateful that you were willing to share it with all of my audience. But before we kind of wrap up, what is, and you just really kind of gave it, but is there any sort of, kind of words of encouragement or just, words that you would love to impart, as, towards the audience in terms of, thinking about this life unscripted, and any words of encouragement, or, especially with women, kind of reconnecting with these lost aspects of themselves, any encouragement you can offer kind of when they're on that journey?
I think that I would just encourage women to invest in their most important relationship, which is their relationship with themselves. And that means getting to know yourself, engaging in a relationship with yourself, loving yourself and nurturing yourself the same way that you do this for the most important people in your life. And if you do that, everything else will work out. Everything will fall into place. But it starts with you. And it's an exciting journey. It's an interesting journey. It's a challenging one, but it's not one you'll ever regret taking.
So beautiful. Lourdes, you are just an amazing person. I am so excited that we had this time to just slow down together and chat in a really meaningful way. It was just so much that I know my audience is going to get out of this. And I'm so appreciative of you and your time and just your expertise. It's amazing.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy and pleasure and an honor.
Awesome. I loved that interview so much. And what I loved is, as I listened back to it, of talking about how much I knew you guys were going to love it. And actually, it was so much that I learned from it. And I'm just really, really pleased to be able to share Lourdes with you. The way she talks about being able to look at the difficulty below the struggle as a way to really get great information about what's going on in our lives. And also this idea that we can often be so fearful of being overwhelmed by our emotion, and ways to really shift the trajectory of that to where our emotions actually become something that are guides for us rather than something to be feared. Like I said, there's so much I got from the interview, but one of the things I love about what she talks about is being able to trust yourself and trusting that you know what you know and what you know is enough. That is so powerful. I think that all of us get into this place of self-doubt and just overthinking and overanalyzing, rather than to be in a place of peace and calm within our body and knowing that what we know is exactly what we know and that is enough. So I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I do. And I want to thank all of you that have sent in your feedback so far via the SpeakPipe app, and also over to me via email at anna@herlifeunscripted.com. And to also those of you that have gone onto iTunes and gave a rate and a review for the podcast. It is so amazing to see those reviews. It just means the world to me. And I encourage you to continue hopping over to iTunes. Actually, you can do it right now when you finish this episode, to leave a review or a rating, because it really does help get the podcast out to more people so that they're able to join this wonderful collective voice that we're creating here. Thank you so much for all of you. I cannot wait to be able to talk with you next episode. And thank you so much for letting me into your worlds and into your hearts. It is truly a privilege to be on this journey with you. Thank you, ladies. Take care.